So, Daniela, I think it would be much more nicer. I know that I asked for a little bio. Do you remember? But
Yeah.
it's much more nicer if you present yourself to the class. You know me, I'm Miguel. This is Rui. Rui works with a podcast also, Eduque.
Yeah.
And this is our class.
Hello. Hola.
Hola. So if you want, you can start by a brief presentation, and then the floor is all yours.
Well,
Thank you very much, Daniela. Let me say that I'm a big fan, as you know. So
me too.
It's a pleasure. It's an honor to have you here with us. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's 7 o'clock in the morning in the place where Daniela is, but I'm sure that she took, and then a stereotype. You took very good Colombian coffee.
Yeah, I did. Like that's energy.
Perfect.
Well, no, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. It's a real honor for me to be here. I don't want to waste that much time introducing myself. I just want to say that I am from Colombia. I am a woman from Colombia, and for me, that's a huge part of my identity. And I've been fighting kind of and researching and like very actively working towards equality, if that's something possible, but just giving my all to contribute to face the strong inequality that I have seen in my country. So I am a social anthropologist, and so my fight's been through my research, through my production of knowledge, kind of. So I have just been trying to disclose some facts and things that I have seen in the field, and I've been doing that actively since 2015, I would say. So yeah, I think is that. I think I'm also very passionate of sounds and music, and I think doing podcasts, it's been a great opportunity, you know, to mix like two different worlds of my life, like the artistic one and then my research field. So that if you ever want to know anything else about me, just can ask me. And yeah, I think we can start, right? At least anyone has any specific questions?
Of course, you can start.
Okay. So yeah, it's really a pleasure for me to be here. And before starting, I really wanted to point out something that I think is very important, and it's that I feel that here, like right now, today, you and I, we are contributing to a very important change. I feel that sometimes we think that change can only occur, you know, in the high level of policy making decisions. And I really believe it's not true. I think just the fact that you are there listening to me, a young woman from Colombia, from Latin America, it's in a very important way subverting the order of knowledge production, of knowledge consumption. And I think these very small facts of choosing which source, you know, what's a legitimate source of knowledge, and finding in a way in me something that it's important to change, that's something that is of interest, that's very important for me, for my country, and I think in a way for the traditional ways of consuming knowledge. And I think that's remarkable, and I think that's something that you and I and Professor Miguel, we are contributing, and that's something that I wanted to point out. And so let's start. Let me share my screen here.
Perfect.
Okay. So When Professor Miguel asked me to be here today, I thought, what will I share with you? Because there are so many layers and so many components of producing the podcast or in disclosing a research in a different way. But I thought in this as a metaphor, in weaving, you know, kind of like knitting, but with a machine, in weaving knowledge, but this time using sound as the means to organize and to disclose that knowledge. And the first question that I would want to address is why sound? Why to choose sound? And I think I find a very specific answer to that. So I want to share with you a super small extract of a video that I really like it. I really super recommend you all to listen at. It's the creator of Radiolab. I don't know if someone of you have ever listened to that podcast. I love it. It's Radiolab, and his founder was Jad Abumrad. So this is a TED talk that he gave, and I think it's amazing. Honestly, if you have ever time to finish it all, please do. I'll just share a small extract. And I would ask you all to carefully listen to it.
We'd bring on somebody.
One of the most hypnotic and spellbinding spectacles in nature, because you have to keep in mind it is absolutely silent.
Like this guy, mathematician Steve Strogatz, and he would paint a picture.
Picture it. There's a riverbank in Thailand in the remote part of the jungle. You're in a canoe slipping down the river. There's no sound of anything, maybe the occasional, exotic jungle bird or something.
So you're in this imaginary canoe with Steve, and in the air all around you are millions of fireflies. And what you see is sort of a randomized Starry Night effect, because all the fireflies are blinking at different rates, which is what you'd expect. But according to Steve, in this one place, for reasons no scientist can fully explain,
Whoop. 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 With thousands of lights on and then off, all in sync.
Now it's around this time that I would generally bring in the beautiful music, as I just did, and you'd start to get that warm feeling. A feeling that we know from science kind of localizes in your head and chest and spreads through your body. It's that feeling of wonder. From 2002 to 2010, I did hundreds of these stories.
Okay, so that was just a super small extract. And there, Jad was talking about this feeling of wonder. So he is talking about a feeling, right? How does wonder feels like? And I think it's not obvious, and we should not take that for granted, because I think sound, and I don't know if you could feel kind of like Jad was presenting us in a certain way how the sound of wonder sounds to him, and I think the sound has offered something that I personally hadn't seen in any other means, and it's a direct connection with our emotions, with the feelings. That's something that music has the power to do, and that's something that we can achieve using sounds. And to me, that was crucial, because my thought in my field works was always, how can I present this? Like I started, as I told you, as an anthropologist, so writing a lot of papers, just writing very strict and structured papers. And it was okay. I mean, I understood, my teacher understood, but very few people besides my teacher and I understood. And it was so difficult in the paper to expose all the things that I was experiencing in the fieldwork, that I was seeing, that I was listening at. So I remember being there and just speaking with mothers, with teachers in the rural lands of Colombia. And they were crying. They were telling me, like, honestly, things that are not just like, oh, so interesting, I'm going to take note about it. Those things were like deep things, important things for them that always involved a lot of feelings. So I started to think that in the structure of a paper, it's very easy to underestimate the power and the role of feelings, of emotions, even in the process of expressing facts, of interpreting those facts. And I found in podcasting and in sound a way of connecting people, of trying to embed people in the situation, and that's something beautiful for me. So that's like a first point. And then I want to talk about the process, the actual process of doing this, and which, like, more or less in a very summarized way, what that process meant to me and which parts. So as I told you, I thought in this metaphor of weaving, and I have here this picture of a woman from Latin America, from Bolivia, where my husband is from. And they have this very pretty fabric. I love it. It's so colorful. It's so pretty. And I thought it's a great example. It's a great metaphor for we to understand, because I think the production and the design of knowledge is so abstract that we can do it, but we don't even know that we are doing it because it's abstract. It's difficult to see, you know, different than a fabric. I have the design and I see if the design works or not in a fabric. But in the production of knowledge, it's more abstract. So that's why I want to bring this like as a more, like as an object, like something that we can easily understand, and then to understand sound, kind of. So here I found four important components of this process of weaving that I want to compare with the process of knowledge production and design through sound. So first of all, we have the thread, right? The material. Then we have a design, like what I want to do with those threads, which colors do I have, what I want to, like, how I'm going to organize those threads in order to have a design. Then we have a tool, right? This is called a loom. And the tool is just going to help me to organize those threads. And then at the end, I have an audience I use for those threads that are organized, right? So let's see in detail what each of those threads means in the process of knowledge production and design through sound again. So I thought about the thread as the knowledge, you know, the knowledge that we have. And I want you to know that I have been thinking about this, and I did it in my podcast from some taking some basis of post-colonial theory. And I want you to know that all of these questions are pretty much based on at least thinking, at least being aware of it. So the knowledge that I have, I would say that there are very different kind of knowledge. And the first question that I would ask is, how can I collect knowledge? Which options do I have to collect knowledge? So in one part we have research, right? I can do it through quantitative methods to qualitative methods. I can gather knowledge from pools. I can gather knowledge from interviews. And that's good. I have a lot of information, right? But then there is another kind of knowledge which comes from experience. And it's also, I would say, very reliable, you know, from our context, from our childhood, from our own experiences. And that other knowledge sometimes works as a filter to understand this other knowledge that I'm gathering from the field. So here, I would just say that in my process, I have been very aware of this first part, because sometimes we pay so much attention to the conclusions, but we don't ask and we don't rectify which were the means that allowed me to get those conclusions. So if I interpreted the facts very, very, very biased, because I think we always are kind of biased, but we can be less biased, or at least we can be aware of some of our biases. Then our conclusion may not be that reliable. So I think that's a very important part. Then I always ask to myself, what knowledge I already have and what is missing, what I still need to know in order to formulate a question or to formulate a conclusion. And then there is this issue of representation, which is also very important about the knowledge that I already have and the knowledge that I want to obtain. And it's, what is this knowledge representing, right? Which communities do I want to represent? And what is this that I have saying about those people, those organizations, those realities, those communities? Because behind that, there are people, there are lives, there are hearts that we need to be aware of. How are we going to represent them? And then even more important than that, who can I represent? Who am I able to represent, right? And who has the ability to represent me? So I think it's very, very important. And then it's connected with that, this last question of who is the other? So who is the other in my story? You know, who has the ability to talk about myself, about my country, about my context, and which context I have the ability to talk about, you know? Because then when we are a podcast and when we are a paper, people is just going to read it, you know, and they are sometimes take it for granted the reliability of our conclusions, and we need to be very, very aware. And also, how is the position that we ourselves are going to take in that knowledge, right? Am I going to be the other in my own story? Is my country going to be the other in my own story? I mean, and it's okay if we decide it to be like that, but I just think we need to be aware of that decision. Who is the other? Who is external, and who can speak about me, about my context? And I like to think about this because that narrows sometimes my researches, right? I can talk about so many things, but like what I do feel comfortable talking about, like what do I know that I can speak about? And in my case, my answer would be definitely my context. Okay, so here we have the thread, the material. Let's imagine a lot of threads, colors, a lot of colors, right? Now, the following question would be, how can I organize those threads, right? Because beautiful threads alone is just that as data, you know, information is there, and we could have like hundreds of interviews transcribed or of pools of percentages. But what does it mean? How can I organize it to make it useful, to give it a sense, to make it look pretty, right? So I like to think in the script, in the process of doing a podcast, as the way of designing this knowledge. So the script will help me to organize the knowledge that I have, to give it sense together. And in order to do that, I would say that the first thing that I would need to do, and a very important one, is to ask a question. And I genuinely think that honest questions are the ones that, usually gets the best results. I mean, having a genuine question. Sometimes I have the answer and then I want to accommodate a question to that answer that I already have. But I think that starting for a question will actually guide me to discover something in the way, and I like to think that. So with that main question, I can compose a story. So then I would have to define a structure of that story. And a structure in podcasting and in any storytelling, it's usually requires of an introduction, a way of engaging the audience, then a body, and then an ending. And I didn't put conclusion because not always the stories have to be concluded. I think actually almost never stories are concluded, really. So we don't actually need to think in a conclusion, but yeah, in a closure. And that shape, it's so different from every design, right? It's a different shape, and everyone just know how they want to shape. And I put here some things that I thought we would need to pay attention. Besides the shape, it's the voices, the points of view that I want to include, right? Again, I go back to the question in knowledge. Who is able to properly represent this context? Who is able to properly interpret this context? And which voices I want to include, whether I'm doing a photographic reportage, whether I am doing a paper, a written one, or whether I'm doing a podcasting, which voices am I going to give voice, which voices I'm going to include, and which points of view. Then which theories am I stating behind? Because we are always doing it consciously and unconsciously. Which one will be my stance for in terms of theories? And a very crucial one for me, to me, honestly, the most important, the language. Which language I'm going to use? Because we cannot take for granted that we are just doing it in English or in your native languages, whatever it is. I think choosing the language is a very strong and political decision, and will in so many ways define the audience. And so if I do it in English, of course I will have more access to a lot of public, right? If I would have done my podcast in Spanish, many of you wouldn't have been able to listen at it, to understand it, right? So it would be just to Latin American or Ibero-America speakers, people. But then if I try to include Spanish, you know, it's also, again, a way of representation. So which language I'm going to use? Maybe doing in both languages, maybe doing just in English, maybe just doing in the other language. But this is a political decision. I just want to say that. And then creativity. And in this very small part, I want to share with you that part of my process. Because sometimes in the academia, I feel that we are so narrow, you know? We feel that our knowledge is the most important. The content is super important, right? We all the time work towards a good content. And that sometimes leads us to put apart the creativity part, the means. How can I expose that knowledge? Because I could have the best content, the best conclusion, but if I don't assure that the means is easily and friendly understandable for many people, for the people that really needs to listen to this, then why is it? I mean, I won't do anything with my great conclusion. And in this, I think we are in a time in the academia where we need to start mixing fields of knowledge, and we need to stop just being narrowed and thinking about this, but we need to mix, you know, to find useful and legitimate other ways of knowledge, such as images, such as production of sound, such as the skills needed to editing a production of sound. And that's another field of knowledge. But once we approach to them, we can combine fields. And when we combine fields, I think that's when creativity emerges. And that's amazing. And sometimes, honestly, I ask myself, why am I doing this? Why I am spending so many time writing and thinking and interviewing what I'm going to do? What do I want to do with this knowledge? And I think that definitely being creative is a way to share the knowledge. I do have it, my teacher may have it, but in my personal opinion, I think it's important for other people outside the academia to have access to this kind of knowledge. That's, again, as I say at the beginning, how change occurs, how politics are actually in practice, I would say. Okay, so we have the design, and then we have the tool. And in here, as we are talking about this metaphor, the tool would be this loom, right? As this picture is this artifact that helps us to organize the threads, right? In a practical way. And to using a tool, we need some skills. We can have tools to collect information, right? We can have tools, softwares that will help us to organize our information. But if we are talking about sound, I would say that our tool would need to help us to materialize that organization of information. So I organize it, right? I design it. I have this amazing script. Now, how can I make this possible? How can I make it material, like audible? And so we have different tools here. So the first very important part of it is, of course, collect sounds. And there are many different ways of collecting sounds. We can record the interviews, we can record ourselves, as you could listen in the podcast that I produced. I had some interviews, I had a small, very pretty, adorable actor whose real name is Pablo, and he helped me. I mean, it was all made up, you know, it was like, he was an actor, but we needed to spend hours and hours in a recording room. And so we need to record that. And we can also download sounds, download songs. But we need to learn tips to record and ways of recording. And that's not all. Once I know the sounds that I have, then I need to start an entire post-production process, an edition process. And again, this requires some skills. So whether we open our minds to learn to other fields, or we start working collectively, which I also think is very nice. And it helps us to recognize how valuable the knowledge of others are. And I think that's very important always. So in the post-production process, I just take, as I show you here in this small image, the raw audio, and I cut it, and I reorganize it, and I rearrange it, and then I add other audios, and then I add music, and I reorganize it. So I think this is a very important process, and a process that takes a lot of time and patience. And I would say that a very important part of this process is also to be able to delete information, I think, and this applies also to any kind of report that we can do. What do we want to talk about, and what is not necessary there? What can I avoid? What is just distracting the attention? And deleting information is hard sometimes because we feel that everything is useful, but it is very important in order to have a result that could engage and that could be very, very focused. So I have here a super small extract of an actual screen recording from my post-production process of the podcast that you listened at, and I want to put it. Give me 1 second. Here. So I don't know if you can see there. Here is the labels that I was telling you before. We have a raw sound, a main track, and then we have a lot of effects, right? And all works in labels. And we need to vary the sounds, the volume, the effects. So just let's see how it works. Of listening, transcribing, interpreting, writing, and concluding. In those moments when I was trying to find my academic voice, a voice that should be legitimate, but also at a time when I was trying to include the hundreds of voices that I had heard after years of fieldwork in rural schools in Colombia. In Colombia with an O. Okay. It doesn't just happen in me. To be honest, the most important part of this story occurred amidst an intense conversation, a powerful dialogue, a construction of meaning with Conmigo. Yes, with you, my dear Jose. And you know what? Actually, I think I would prefer that they got to know you directly. But wait. Here we are. So as you could see, there was this process of editing or post-production. I used Pro Tools, but the good thing with this is that there are a lot of tips and a lot of softwares and a lot of free sound that makes this as a good way of disclosing knowledge and of using a very low cost. So if any one of you are interested on doing this or just want to experience working with sound, I can offer you some tips, very basic ones, but like when you record, for example, you can do it even using your cell phone. Sometimes we think, no, I don't have a microphone, but we don't need like a huge microphone. When I started doing this podcast, like we were in the midst of COVID, everything was like closed. And I was going to use an studio and we couldn't rent it at the end because it was closed. And then we improvised a small studio in my walk-in closet. So the thing is, we need to find spaces that do not have flat walls or flat floor. You know, you need carpet, you need fabric, you need something that absorbs the sound. So we can avoid echo. Just think on that. But you can definitely do it using your cell phones, really, with a microphone like this in your cell phone. What else? I think it's very good also, like free source of downloading sounds. And in terms of software, I think the ones that are using Mac, we have GarageBand, but I know most of the computers have programs for editing sound. As I told you, I used Pro Tools and I use it for free. So it's very low cost and we can have very nice results if we are willing to spend some time doing it. Okay, and the last component would be the audience they use. And please remember that those 4 components is not like step by step, right? It's more like a mix, because sometimes I need to think in the audience while doing the design, but also I need to know in which kind of knowledge I already have. So it's like I need to think in all those 4 components all the time, right? So in terms of the audience, is like, what do I want this outcome to be useful for? And I think this is a very important question since the beginning. So in this case, we have this indigenous woman here from Bolivia that is using the fabric that I showed you at the beginning, right? She's using it as a skirt to carry on her baby in her bag. So there are 3 different uses, and every one of those uses required a different composition of the design and composition of the fabric, and of the cloth. So the same thing is like, what do I want to do with this? I mean, it's completely valid if we just want it to be inside the academia. I mean, I have friends, they are like, I don't care, I just want this thesis to obtain my degree. And that's a motive, right? But we can also hope to do something useful with that knowledge. And so which audience do I want this to be heard by? So I don't know, in my case, I thought it was really important for me that kids would be also able to understand my podcast. And to me, that was the huge, the biggest achievement. I think talking with strong and difficult words is so easy. But I think that having something complex and making it easily understandable, that you listen at it and you don't even feel that you are listening to something complex, that's a challenge. And I wanted to take that challenge. So in my case, I thought that I wanted it to achieve, like to reach the ears of kids, of moms, and of policymakers. And that was my goal. So which one is your goal of audience? Then with that audience in mind, you will have a better understanding or how to advertise your work, or where to publish it, right? Am I going to do a blog? Where do I want this blog to be shared? And or if you are doing a podcast, which channels? And this is another very nice thing about podcasting. We can distribute it freely in a lot of platforms. Just have in mind that there are some platforms to upload the feel, the sound. And then there are some other platforms that will distribute that feel, right? So just Google it, everything you can find, like tutorials and everything, it's there. But it's very easy and it's very, very low cost. So that's amazing from podcasting. And then of course the tone and the structure of the story, which we already talked about in the script. So that would be the audience. And I think that would be it, like the 4 components. And before we end, I want just to very quickly talk, we are good at time, about this picture, which I sent Professor Miguel, and that I love. And I want to talk a bit about the content of my podcast and this process in terms of the content of this knowledge of the threads, right? And this picture was taken, but before I say something about this picture, I would really want some of you, if there is some of you that would like to tell me what you see in this picture. What can you maybe think it is about? What does it tell you something? Does it make you feel something or nothing? If any brave student or teacher in the audience want to to say something about it.
Don't be shy.
It's a classroom.
It's a classroom.
I think it's a classroom. Yeah, and yeah.
That was my classroom.
Give up all.
Yeah, just like my classroom.
You heard?
Is it a normal classroom? Is it the classroom as the one that you are right now? Sit down.
She didn't listen to you. You can stand.
Yeah. I'm saying it looks like my classroom when I was in the elementary school, but with chairs. Even this has chairs, but my classroom did not have chairs in the elementary school. It's empty.
What else? What did someone say over there?
Danielle, I said that the school is empty.
It's empty. That's very important. Something else that someone wants to add?
It has a pothole.
What is it? Sorry.
Amanda, allow that,
It
please.
has a pothole.
It has, yeah.
And I think those are development challenges if the classroom has cracks, which means that there's poor finish or poor utilization of resources.
So yeah, it looks like abandoned classroom which used to be overcrowded.
Those are great observations, actually.
The color of the photograph. The color of the photograph shows that it's depressing the mood and everything around that place. It's not bright and it's dark.
Oh, did you hear?
More or less. Can someone that is closer to a microphone just say the same to me, please?
Yes, of course, Danielle. Wait just a second.
Okay.
I will.
Thank you. Sorry for making you wake up. Wake up, no, stand up, sorry.
I'm saying the color of the photograph brings up the depression and despair in that situation because it's dark, doesn't show sunshine. It's not colorful.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I love all that you have said. So we have some people that have in fear, right? Interpret some things like, and also talk about feelings, kind of like what you just said, like kind of depression or like, or facts, it's empty. But then what does that fact say about this classroom? And I think it's very, very amazing. This picture, I love it because this was in one of the schools that I visit in a small town that is called La Esperanza, which means the hope. And this was not an abandoned classroom, actually. And when I was looking at it, I thought that this picture reflects all the content very much of my critique to the model of rural education. Because in so many ways, and my thesis and more or less what I wanted to achieve in the podcast was to make this contrast between what was stated in the design of the policy making of and in the real life of small classrooms in rural schools, and this huge gap that is between those two spaces. So the model states so many things that we don't have here. For example, in terms of pedagogy, the model states that students have to be in tables, like groups for 4 or 5 people. And then you can see they are not, because the model also states that per classroom you would need to have more or less 15 students, and we have way more than 15 chairs. So the teacher cannot just make this group of work. She needs to give them order. Then the model states certain resources for the walls. And if you can see, the wall does not have anything but like small white paper pasted. And some resources for the facilities. And they are so proud to say and to think that they have great facilities. And it is true that it is great that we have ceiling and we have floor, but you can also see that the state of the facilities are not good at all. And then maybe it's not that visible, but behind one of the windows that we can see, it's broken. And that's also because of the insecurity that the school has, because they cannot have any of value inside, not even a ball to play, because thieves are going to break into the school and take it out. And that's the everyday life of the school. So the window is always broken because it's always been broke again. So so I really like it. And I think that using images, it's also a very, very good way of transmitting content. But then what I want to say is that it's not enough. Sometimes it's not enough. Sometimes what we have to say behind something like an image or like an audio, and to explain this, for example, not just to give you a sensation of this, but in order to be able to talk about a model of rural education and the role of the state and maybe the gaps from the state to the real reality. I need to dig a little bit deeper with some information. And then our challenge, I would say, is how can we transmit this kind of information, this kind of content, using different means and using new means. I think that's it. So that's it. Thank you so much for being with me today and for having me today.
Thank you, Daniela. It was amazing. I loved it. Yesterday I was going through your podcast again, of course. Can you hear me? Yeah. Loud and clear? I was going again. I was listening to your podcast again, and I was listening again to the making of. And one of the things that every time I hear something new comes to my attention in your podcasts. But last night it was in the making of, so it's a more gray, not so shiny thing. What your critics to Escuela Nueva, and if you may, in 1 or 2 minutes, because I want them to ask you questions. What are your main critiques to the Escuela Nueva? We know from your podcast and from the making of that some work for some things are nice, like the growing coverage, but if you grow in coverage, if you have more schools, what is the problem?
Yeah, so you're a good listener, because that was actually my critique to Escuela Nueva, was actually my main question, and was actually the main point that I wanted to address in a very polite way, so it also reached the ears of Escuela Nueva. And I want to tell you that was very successful in that sense, Vicky Colbert, who is like the founder of this in Colombia, she actually get to listen at it, and she was actually interviewed by Will too, and I think that was amazing to achieve that. And the thing is that, and it took me like 5 years to understand, but it's very kind of complex. It's very tricky because of all the politics that are inside behind. And so Escuela Nueva started when Colombia had no any kind of rural education. So let's think we were like from an illiteracy rate of 20%, and then it arrived something. So it started to grow super fast. The government made a lot of investment on it, like super quickly in the 70s. And so in 10 years, 20 years, they increased coverage like in 80%, you know? So it is called a success because it increased coverage. So by the 90s, we had like this huge increasement of coverage. And it was like an international boom, right? Like how it worked so well.
You'll go
And
now.
I think it worked. Yeah.
Sorry. So you are talking about very successful outputs.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Yeah. And then, and I think in a way, if we talk about coverage, like how many students are like officially enrolled, it was success in a way, right? Because from nothing to 80%, that's a lot. And so the state in the 90s said like, okay, that was it. 90% was good of coverage. We are not funding this anymore. So we are almost more than 30 years after that decision where no more investment was made into this program. So there is no entity that has right now control over the quality, over the resources. And right now what we have in Colombia, it's like this great amount of schools, of very old schools, like the one that I just showed you in the picture, where the teachers do not know if they are part of Escuela Nueva or not, where the model is not clear because the Minister of Education have changed the program all the time. But as we are using Escuela Nueva, it's very confused, right? And then I would talk about the outcomes, which would be the indicator of a successful outcome, right? That's my main critique. Is it for having kids that go inside a classroom? Or is it for kids to have opportunities to change their life through education? You know what would be the right of being educated? Is it to be seated inside there, or is it to actually learn something and to be able to have the opportunities to do something different with that knowledge? And the truth is right now, the government just say, we are okay. We have 80% coverage, but we are not looking at the quality. We are not looking at what is happening with those kids. We are not looking at the small rates of dropout, of people that cannot attend to high school, because from the 100% that goes to elementary school, only 30% goes to high school. That bad is the system in elementary school. And so, yeah, I barely know how to read when I'm like 18 years old, but that's it. And I think that's a very mediocre goal. And so that's like summarizing a lot. That's the critique.
So it's open to you to make questions. So please, if you want, I think it will be easier for Daniela if you just can stand up and go near the micro, okay?
I'll give you my share. Turn it to here, and you can sit here and talk directly to Daniela.
Okay, okay. So who wants to make any question about the podcast that you hear? About, I don't know, Jose? Go, just go.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi, my name is Giselle. I'm from Italy, and my question would be, so listening to the podcast, it really made me think about the limitation of, I would say, development cooperation, because you could really see how the structural settings were so embed in the circumstances of Jose that even an external intervention wouldn't have result in a like positive outcome. So I was wondering, how does like a development cooperator navigates like these sort of circumstances, aside from like what else can be done for maybe like kids or people like Jose, aside from creating like a platform, like giving him a space to like raising awareness and stuff like that. Are there any ways, possible ways to create other like positive like changes and stuff like that? So yeah.
That's a very, very good question, Giselle. Well, I think, and this is my very, very personal opinion about it, but I think that in context like Colombia, where the public intervention is so weak and it's pretty much for the newspapers, not that much for the reality. So in those scenarios, like international cooperation and the private sector plays a very important role. I studied development and policy education, and we had like these long discussions about public sector and private sector, but then I will go again to the context. From where context are we talking about? You know, because there are countries like in Europe where the public sector, like the Minister of Education or even the president, I don't know, they have different ways of intervene, right? But in places like Colombia, they do not. They really do not. So I think it is important to have an intervention, yeah. And I think a lot of initiatives and NGOs that work towards that kind of situation works. But I would say that it is a very and strongly structural problem. That's why it's so complex, because it's not just about let's find an easy solution for Jose, because there are thousands of Jose, like thousands, maybe millions, right? And then just giving him so incentive may not change his likelihood of entering a university if he wants to do so, right? So I think it's more about recognizing that the model that we have do not fit the context anymore. So I would say, and that would be my position about how to approach to these situations. Whether we change the context and we keep the model, or we change the model and we adjust to the context that we have. But yeah, so in my experience, what I have seen is that sometimes, especially international interventions, do not know the context exactly. And here we have like a very strong things in the context. For example, cultural things, right? For example, how people interact, how people is able to associate among each other to make partnerships, how people is able to respond to a financial aid without without just taking advantage of it and working towards something. And sometimes these financial aids or vouchers that we receive from government or private sector or international cooperation is just like a superficial relief of a pain that is structural. So I would go better to the disease. You know what I'm talking about? So that would be my point of view.
Yes. And I have another thought, like, have there been actually some maybe proposal to better Escuela Nueva, even like outside of the government? Have there been some maybe outside initiatives to promote educational programs that can maybe, like, I don't know, improve the educational system?
So the thing in Colombia is that Escuela Nueva was in charge of rural education, but until the 90s. From the 90s, Escuela Nueva, the government said, like, we don't need you anymore. We already have the coverage, bye-bye. So Escuela Nueva started to operate as a private NGO from the 90s until now. So they do work as a private NGO. They have projects and they are improving itself, but they are not longer in charge of all the schools of the country, which the government is. But the government itself, like, I think you can imagine, like, very bureaucratic, like very slow. Like, to implement a small change in a booklet, they will take 5 years when that change is not needed anymore and you need others, right? So, and they have run so many programs, so many in parallel, that it gets so confused right now. All teachers are confused right now. Like, one school may follow this book and this other, and then you have this workshop on that, and then teachers here come to this other kind of workshop, and this year by year, and right now it's just a mix of many different attempts that have done nothing. So there are initiatives to change and to improve, but our disasters are like separate from each other, are divided, you know, and we change from president every 4 years. And so we renew all the process every 4 years. So I think it is very important to find a way to articulate, you know, the initiatives. Like, I definitely prefer that we just put 1 or 2 initiatives, but that we can cover, that has sense, you know, not 12 that no one understands. And then the long term is another important thing. You need to keep track on time of this, because if not, you could have a great initiative of improvement, but in 4 years they are not going to fund it. So that's what I'm talking. That is a structural problem. It's very difficult to be solved or to be addressed. At least something very structural in the politics and in the culture kind of change.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you, Giselle.
Thank you, Daniela. So please, Howard.
My name is Howard from Uganda.
Hello.
First of all, I want to thank you for using the voice of a child in the podcast. It's not so common that children's voices are projected in development aspects. For me, that is one thing that I find so interesting about it. Just 2 issues. One, you quoted very interesting statistics about the sewage challenges, the water problems, about 80%. Then you said about only 6% of the rural roads have been worked on. I see this to continue to be a problem, that if it's not addressed, the 33% of the 15 years old youth who are migrating to the cities will continue. And then even if schools are constructed, you don't have anybody to attend to. Then you also have the challenges of the rebels who actually, and the gangs who are attracting the young people to join the groups. So is government doing something about it? And then the last one is in the podcast, does it show how much representation of the sample group is, you know, when you do research, you have the sampling. I don't know how you worked that around. Does that represent the big concern and the voices of the population who gave you factual information? I thought I would understand that. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Both are great and difficult questions. For the first one, yeah, migration is a huge issue right now, and even more so if right now we talk about Venezuela. We are border countries, like neighbor countries with Venezuela, and they are migrating, like it's like an exodus. So we are having a lot of problems in Colombia with that. I mean, with migration and with the big cities being overpopulated. And of course, with lack of employment because the economy is not stable. So that, as you said, brings problems of insecurity and so many things. And if we think about the context of Colombia, also drug trafficking and so on. So it's a very, very complex issue. I think right now the migration issue between Colombia and Venezuela, it's been that so problematic that they have definitely stopped doing things for the rural kids that migrate to the big cities. But then, and I really like that you point this out, because that was also one of the main issues when I started this in 2015. I didn't start it in the field of education. I started doing a consultancy for a company that has their factories in the rural areas. So I had to do this field work, and I remember doing a lot of interviews there. And when they all were like, no, we'd like to live here. We don't like to live here. We want to live in the city. We want to travel. We want to do this. You know, we want to go to the big city. And I thought by that time, like, why do they want to live here? You know, like, why do they want to live? Like, what are they going to do in Bogota, in the capital? What are they going to do? I don't know. There is no place. If they don't even know how to read, what are they going to do in Bogota? And I was talking about that with my boss in that time. And I remember she told me, like, yes, Dani, but why would they need to stay here and to bear these conditions? And for me, that was a very crucial moment in my research and in my personal point, like in my personal position towards this issue, because I realized that why did they don't have, why would they need to continue working for our food, right? Because they harvest the food that we eat in the city. They do that. So why do they need to sacrifice their life under so horrible conditions? Because they were born there. And I don't say that the answer is to migrate, because that brings other problems. But migration it's a very, very difficult topic, right? Like, I can definitely understand. And if I would have been born there, maybe I would have migrated too, you know? So yeah, I don't know. I think the government is not doing that much anymore. And as I say, I've seen initiatives. But the truth is, after years and after years, everything remains the same. So that means that those efforts are not being visible. So I think it's very important to strengthen the economy and also to foster the internal market, right? To foster the internal consumption of what is produced and to organize. Because I think if they would have more opportunities, they would definitely stay. If they would have, you know, they have their family, they have their homes, why they would migrate? But we need to foster more opportunities. Yeah, I don't know if that answered your question, but that's what comes to my mind. And about the sample, it's also a very, very good question. So I am a fan of qualitative research, and I do like critique a lot in my mind and in my works how much we find, like what do we find reliable and legit. Sometimes we think that what has numbers is the thing that is reliable. And I have conducted polls, and I have conducted also quantitative research. And I just found in those processes that is not much reliable. I won't say it's not reliable, but it doesn't make it more reliable than the other data. I would say that is we could have two ways of analyzing a culture or a context. So let's think in a forest full of trees, right? I can just rent a helicopter and fly over the trees and get dimensions of the entire forest, right? So there are like 2,000 trees, and we have these dimensions of land or whatever. And that will give me useful information. Or I can just take my backpack and walk inside the forest and look at the wood and stay the night and see the animals, right? And both are different perspectives. It's just that walking, I cannot walk that much territory. So I think both gives different kind of information, both reliable depending on the interpretation and on the methods used, right? So in terms of my sample, I don't have an exact number because, as I told you, it's been a long research process of years. And I was born, and when I was a kid, my family had a farm in the area. So I used to travel there like every weekend, you know, so I have this understanding of the region from my very own positionality, but I have my understanding of the region. And
can you define that concept, please, Danielle? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Please, because it's very important for us.
Yeah, sure. So
sorry.
It's like what is it?
If you may.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you very much.
So I understand positionality as my own reflexivity of my position in the field, right? Who am I representing here for them, and which are my filters to understand them. So in my case, for example, I was born in the capital. I was from Bogota. So for a girl from the capital going to the rural areas, I am from Colombia, but I am not one of them in their eyes. You know, I will go and I will speak different and I will dress different. And that defines what they are going to say to me, what they are going to answer to me. And when I understand what I represent in that context, I can find ways of, you know, closing the gaps a little bit, or of being aware that they are not giving me full information about certain topics or things like that. So it's more or less which one is my position, which am I representing, that will definitely delimit the kind of information that I will obtain from the field. So in that sense, I know that delimited some of the information I got, because sometimes they didn't want to talk to me, and I said to them, I'm an anthropologist. They don't know, they never knew what I was doing there. They like, yeah, this is this girl from the Minister of Education. I was like, no, I'm not from the Minister of Education. No, this is the girl from this NGO. And I was like, I'm not from any NGO, but they, you know, but they just accept me in a way. But I had to know, and it was very important for me to contrast the information, you know, because I was walking the forest inside but I was also trying to look at the perspective and to look at some theories to give me clues of what to look, of what to ask, of what, if I was interested on getting to know a process of implementation of a policy, for example. Theory is there, you know, and theory is very useful for giving us clues on what to look at, because there are people that have wasted a lot of time just giving us some clues. So I thought that was very useful. And so I did a lot of interviews. I don't know how many, honestly, more than 200, maybe 500. But I believe that we can do a research with less than that if we are going to go very in deep. We can do research with one person, but we need to know that it's one person and the results has its pros and cons, right? But it's same legitimate, it's the experience of someone. And so, yeah, I would say that about the sample.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Anyone else? Please, come on. There's one more question, or two or three. Are you all right with the time, Daniela?
Yeah, it's
Yes?
very early here, so.
I know. Just keep taking your coffee or tea.
Hi,
Yeah,
Daniel.
so hello.
Yes, I'm Joyce from Tanzania, and listening to the podcast, I had questions like I would say it's two in one. You talked about the economic situation being one of the reasons of the poor economic situation being the free trade agreement, and as you termed it, it was like a forced. So I mean, like questions came to in my mind, like, okay, it's a free trade agreement, so it's an agreement. Like, why is it forced? Like, if it's an agreement, yeah, that is the first question. But again, the second question would be like, I've been hearing reading about development, they would say like, okay, especially for African countries, like if they want to reach the development, or like reach the, the best stage of development, it's advisable, or they're advised to like join in regional blocks or something like that. So, and I could say like free trade agreement or free trade area, something is one of the stage of towards economic integration and greater integration for that matter. So if we say like, okay, free trade agreement is a problem, so what would be like, your advice, like, should we abandon like these integrations, or like how should we go about when we enter into this integration, you could say? So those are my questions.
Great questions too. My God, you all have amazing questions. I mean it. Yeah, so again, I would say context. I wouldn't be able to advise anything like globally or for other contexts than the one that I really know. So in terms of Colombia, of Latin America, pretty much, the free trade agreement, I mean, it's good and bad. I don't like to use those terms, but let's think that it depends on the point of view, right? If we talk about the country, like the incomes and the fluid of economy inside the country is not bad, because it's moving agreements internationally to trade, right? So it is fostering that we have new products, that we have more variety of products, and that's good. But in terms of small producers and small factories, and very, very local, for example, rural people that produce, that grows food, that are small farms, that thing have killed them, like literally, because we are here fostering an economy that is similar to the economy from the US, right? Like, let's produce, and let's consume a lot. And then we have like these huge factories or these huge trade agreements. But then what happens with the small producers? And the thing here, and again, I talk about the context, is that culturally, because in what stage of my research, I thought, well, maybe there could be the option of making partnership, right? Why they have to be small in the field? We can make it grow to make partnerships and to make association of small rural producers in order to be able to compete with those prices that are coming from the free trade agreement. And the truth, when I went to the field, is that people, honestly, most of the people just don't know how to work in team. It's so basic, but like, I think sometimes we think about these terms like, wow, are there? But everything goes back to people and the way people live and think. And if people do not know how to work, like to teamwork, you know, how to, they usually complain because their neighbor stole something, and then they are not reliable and they cannot do partnerships, and they just don't find ways of being bigger. So in that sense, it's almost impossible for a small farm to compete against these great, huge trades. So that has had consequences in the rural lands, that's for sure. And it has decreased a lot their sales and then their incomes. And yeah, and you asked also about the word forced, right? And I think right now I'm not quite sure what I put it, but like why I put it. But I would say that in the moment that we choose the trade agreement, there were a lot of political decisions behind it. You know, we talk about democracy, but democracy is sometimes just a ritual. Is not actually something that happens. And behind any election or behind any decision, important decision, they can make, you know, a poll, they can make us to vote, but it doesn't mean that they are actually being honest with the results. And there are so many interests. And in Colombia, we had this great movement against that. And even so, the president at the time just took the decision. So that's maybe why I use that word.
Okay.
Thank you, Daniela. Anyone else, please? Anyone else? Okay. Anyone else? No? Okay. So, Daniela, we still have hello.
Hello.
We still have some time, and I was hearing you, and I was thinking about protectionism or liberalism, because yeah.
No, I listen. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a very important, or something in between. And free trade agreements are all for liberalism and neoliberalism. So the big factories, the big enterprises, that those who are profiting from the trade agreements they are from Colombia. The capitals are from Colombia or not? or they are foreigner enterprises?
They are mainly foreign.
They are mainly foreigner.
Yeah.
So they can, if you know, because
it's not
do
my
they
field,
keep-
yeah.
Yes, I know, but just to you read the paper.
Yeah.
So if you don't know, it's not a problem. Of course, we don't know everything. Of course.
Yeah.
Do you feel, or do you read it somewhere? Income is produced in Colombia with Colombian work. But
Yeah, it is. Income, you said?
Income, yeah. But capital flows to where? It remains in Colombia, or do you think it goes somewhere else?
Well, I can speak from the field works that I have done. I don't know what the official data says, but what I have seen is that companies, there are huge companies in Colombia, and you know, it's a country that has like a huge amount of raw material of any kind, of food, of metal, of oil, of gold, a lot. So, but the thing is that most of the companies that buy that are private companies, like international companies from abroad, right?
Multinationals, yeah.
Yeah, as happens in most of the countries of the global south, if I may use that word. So they are extracting a lot of raw material and a lot of things, and they do give jobs, right? But like super badly paid, daily paid. It's a way of exploitation, I would say. And they took all the raw material and then they produce things with that, right? And from the companies that I have seen, they, for example, this flowers company, they grow roses and tropical flowers, and they export it to Europe and to the US. But they were telling me that the borders, like the trading requirements, are very demanding. So they always have to give the best of what they harvest to the exportation, and the remaining, the defective one, remains in Colombia. Sorry. And that happens with flowers, that happens with food, that happens with cheese, that happens with everything. If a company wants to export it, they will remain the damaged products in the country. And then we also have the small producers in any field. And there are a lot, like families and a lot of, that's how the economy moves the most in most of Latin America, small production. But then you cannot compete the prices between a small production process and a multinational that comes with, you know, innovative designs with raw materials that they actually took from our lands. So yeah, it's not good. But then we also don't help. I mean, I say, yeah, it's bad, and the policy makers should not allow them to do that. But we, as consumers, also foster that. And then we, as producers, are not willing to cooperate and to, as I was saying, work in team. It's so basic, but it's so difficult for many of the producers to be trustable and to be reliable among each other. And in that way, I mean, we can blame each other, but we are not going to change things if they don't, you know, also move and try to, yeah, to make partnerships. I think that would be a good way, but it's very difficult to achieve in those contexts.
So thank you very much, Daniela. One last thing, if you allow me. Because of you, this year, the paper that they have to, the students have to send to me to achieve to have a grade has changed a little bit. So I'm allowing now I'm allowing podcasts.
That's
And,
amazing.
yes. So we have till now, we have one group that they are going to work and try to make a very amateur podcast, because we really don't know how to make it. So we are going just to try to make it. And my question is this one for all the class to see you. I'm going to change the camera, okay, if I may.
Yeah.
So if in what now it's called magical time, that is the time that we don't have, but we can arrange when we love things. If we can approach you to have some tips during the process.
Please do so. I would be more than happy. Whatever you need, I'm glad to hear that. As I said at the beginning, and doing this is contributing to change. And I really feel that the academia should also be exposure to some change. And I think that would be amazing. So please do it. I don't know if you have my email or you can share with your students.
I will share. I will share.
And please free to let me know whatever. And it doesn't matter. I mean, as I said before, we don't need to be experts. I'm super fan of sounds, but this podcast that you listened was my first attempt of a podcast. I'd never done an episode before. So yeah, it's just, I think, a matter of mixing knowledge and creativity and a lot of time, but you can do. And please ask me. I have a lot of resources, like web pages that I know you can use, softwares that are free, places where you can download like non-copyright music or sounds, and just write to me and I'll be happy to help.
Okay, thank you very much, Daniela. Now, really the last thing, I was amazed the first time when I heard your podcast, is that you could maintain an academical structure in a podcast, giving space to the voices that never have that space. Because I'm not saying that they don't have a voice, they have a voice. We are not giving Jose a voice.
That's true.
He has a voice, but many times we don't listen to that voices. But you did it in an academical. You did with an academic approach, and then with a fantastic product to disseminate and to put people alert. And I was really amazed by how you could decolonize the knowledge, the production of knowledge. So that was my first feeling when I saw your podcast. And I really wanted to have you here, because it's possible to do science and to also reach and try to change a little bit our world. So thank you very much. The last words are for you, of course.
No, thank you. Thank for those words. And and honestly, deeply thank you all, your students, all of you that are there listening at it, that hopefully have listened to the podcast. It's an honor for me. I may totally be your colleague or of your age, and it's an honor for me that you have taken the time and to listen at me. As you said, how amazing is for we to listen to Jose. As well as amazing, I think that you give me the space. And as you said, I have a voice, even though you don't listen at it. But the fact that you find something reliable to listen at in my voice, it's very important for the academy, and I think for the production of knowledge and for the consumption of knowledge. And this is a great step for a change in that field. And I want to thank you all.
Thank you, Danielle. Thank you. I hope to see you soon. Okay?
Yeah.
Okay? Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Have a fantastic week. Bye. Thank you. Hello.